Welcome to Hannah's Heart.
So Hannah, she's just one of the women who did struggle with infertility in the Bible.
No matter who we are, we can be inspired by the fact that Hannah took her pain to God, and God heard her and was with her.
So when she was praying at the temple, she had been weeping and not eating, and her lips were moving, but her eyes were closed, and the priest was like, "Hey, why are you drunk at the temple?"
It can become an obsession when you want a child so deeply.
And desiring that baby and to be a mama. Every holiday, every Mother's Day.
This is not a show that's going to promise you a certain outcome. But this is a show that says, however God answers your cry, we know that He's enough. Hello, I'm Kendra, and you are listening to Hannah's Heart on American Family Radio. And today I am super excited because we are joined with a special guest that I have been looking forward to having on our program for so many weeks. His name is Mark Mellinger, and he is the Marketing and Development Director at the National Embryo Donation Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. So Mark, welcome to Hannah's Heart. Glad to have you with us.
Kendra, good to be with you.
Thank you. So we absolutely love what you do and your passion, and it's such a creative thing. A lot of people have never even heard of embryo adoption. So let's start from the very beginning. What is embryo adoption?
Well, I think the best thing to say about it right off the bat, what helps people visualize the essence of it is it's the way to become pregnant with your adopted child, and there's a lot more to unpack beyond that. But that's the first best way to sort of introduce people to the concept of embryo adoption. It is the way to become pregnant with your adopted child. Now, to take a few steps back, the NEDC, what we were really created for was as a response to some of the ethical dilemmas that IVF had presented. There were, back in the late 90s, a lot of families were doing in vitro fertilization, families who could not have babies on their own. And what would happen is generally in IVF, more embryos were created than the couples would use. Let's say that a couple developed 12 embryos with their physician, but they only wanted 2 children. Maybe they used up crude way to put it, but it's just, I can't think of a better term. They went through 5 embryos to get their 2 children. They would have their 2, so there you go. They have their 2 children. That's all they wanted to build their family. So in this particular, for instance, you would have 7 embryos remaining. And for that couple, the dilemma is, gee, we have these embryos left, and we aren't planning to use them to build our family. We have the 2 children that we want. So what do we do with these embryos? And we believe, just as an aside, Kendra, as I know you do, that these embryos are the tiniest human lives. They're God's
Absolutely.
Smallest image bearers, right? I mean, if you believe life begins at conception, then life has begun. For
whether
these
it's in a
embryos,
petri dish or not, it's life, and it's developing.
Life. That's right. It's developing life at the embryonic stage. So for a couple in that particular predicament, I mean, their options were really not good. You could either donate the embryos to scientific research, which means the embryos will be snuffed out, so there are lives gone in God's economy. Another option would be to just discard the embryos, which obviously also robs them of life. Or the third option that these couples were faced with was just to keep them in frozen storage sort of indefinitely, which is really not making a decision at all and is just going to cost them generally several $100s per year. That's the frozen storage fee that they would pay, I guess, in perpetuity for as long as they wanted to keep the embryos frozen. So So the CEO of the Christian Medical and Dental Associations at the time, Dr. David Stevens, realized that these three options were not good. None of them was good in God's eyes. None was morally satisfying. So he said, what we need to do is create some organization where we can take these embryos that are remaining from IVF and find other loving families who will adopt these embryos and use them to build their own families. And so that's how the NEDC was started. Dr. Stevens was able to connect with Dr. Jeffrey Keenan, who is the president and medical director of our organization. He helped co-found this organization all those years ago with Dr. Stevens, and he's still our president and medical director today. And God has just really grown the work of the NEDC since then. We build the whole operation around the sanctity and dignity of the human embryo. Mm-hmm. We love that we are able to help these couples who have created the embryos through IVF. We're able to give them some closure and absolve them of any moral difficulties that were going on in their hearts and minds. We love that we are able to help other couples build their families with these tiny lives. And most, not all, but probably 85 to 90% of the couples who adopt embryos through the NEDC have themselves had some sort of fertility challenge. So this can be a great way of building a family and an answer to prayer for these folks. So we love that, how it affects the couples on each side of the equation. But we're really here, first and foremost, for these embryos, to protect these lives. And God has blessed the work of the organization. In the close to 2 decades, we've been doing embryo transfers. I guess we've been doing embryo transfers for about 17 years. It took a while for things to get going in those early years. But God has now blessed us with the births of over 1,100 children.
Wow.
Through the NEDC's embryo adoption program.
That's incredible.
That's the most of any embryo adoption program in the world, which we don't say to brag. We say to brag on God, because prayer is what has fueled the NEDC, and it is His work. So it's a great thing to be a part of.
The heart behind that and the desire to give life a chance is so absolutely beautiful. But let's back up for just a moment and talk about, you gave us the 4 options that couples who often go through IVF are faced with if they have extra frozen embryos. Just nationwide, can you tell us what are fertility clinics? Are they overrun with frozen embryos? Has this become a major problem in our country?
Yeah, it is a major problem in our country, and there are too many frozen embryos out there, and that is because in general, we don't mince words about this. It's painful to know that this is the truth, but it is. In general, IVF is not practiced in an ethical or morally responsible. It's treated at a lot of fertility clinics, almost like you're going to the grocery store or to the department store. IVF is often treated as very transactional. If you're the couple going in to have IVF and build your family that way, often the way a fertility clinic will look at it is, okay, you're a consumer. You're coming in, you want a product. That product is a happy outcome and the birth of a baby. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to maximize the chances of you having that successful outcome. And unfortunately, there's when the bad part of that is the whatever it takes part of the statement. And a lot of IVF clinics just don't practice it responsibly, so they create all these extra embryos that probably do not need, in most cases, to be created. Almost certainly don't need to be created. And these couples, I get it, when they're struggling to have children, they sort of get tunnel vision. All they're thinking of is, I want a baby, I want a baby, I want a baby. Very understandable. I think God's wired most of us that way. But they're not thinking on the front end what's going to happen when these embryos, when I'm left with more embryos than I ever needed to build my family. So yeah, you wind up with a lot of frozen embryos. There are some estimates that it's over 1 million in this country, and these are tiny lives just on ice. So it's a problem, and it points to the larger problem of the disregard for life with which the fertility industry in general operates. There are notable exceptions for which we're thankful, but they're few and far between.
Well, I love that you mentioned tunnel vision, because I think that's something that as couples, Christian couples that are struggling with infertility, we have to be so careful not to place motherhood or fatherhood as an idol in our life that is more important than serving the Lord. And my husband and I faced that when we started our fertility journey. We said, you know what? We have been pro-life our whole life. We cannot change what we believe about life beginning at conception now because it's convenient to believe something different. And that's something that I hope couples can hear and really let sink into their heart, and also realize there are other protocols that are life-affirming, and there are clinics that will be willing to work with you with your values and your beliefs, but you do have to often hunt them down. Now, my husband and I, we chose to go through Southeastern Fertility, which you all are associated with, and the reason we picked them was because of their association with you. We said, they clearly are willing to value human life, so let's check them out. Can you tell us about Southeastern Fertility and what your connection is with them?
Right. Yeah, happy to do it. And right, that was how I got to know you and Eric, at least at first. And Southeastern Fertility is one of those exceptions in the fertility industry that I was talking about. So they are our medical partners at the NEDC. The way that the arrangement is that we at the NEDC are co-located with Southeastern Fertility. So we're in the same building, we're under the same roof. So for people who are interested in doing embryo adoption through us, it really does provide one-stop service. They do the processing, the embryo matching, a lot of the administrative type work is done by us at the NEDC. And then when it's time for the frozen embryo transfer to actually be performed, then that is performed by our medical partners at Southeastern Fertility. So we work hand in glove. We work very well together, but technically we are separate entities. The NEDC is a faith-based nonprofit. Southeastern Fertility is a for-profit company that is run by Christians, but it is not a faith-based charity like we are.
Correct. Okay, wonderful. Well, that's a great distinction. Now, you mentioned earlier the Christian Medical and Dental Association, and that your roots are kind of from that. I'm a little bit familiar with them, love their work, and they recently released a curriculum called Bridging the Gap that is designed to help churches understand bioethical concerns, things such as issues of abortion and life issues and end-of-life issues. And they put out an incredible free curriculum on this. And I saw the NEDC in one of their endnotes. And so they broke down what I really loved, some complicated things that as believers we get into. Well, what would God think about surrogacy or egg donation or sperm donation? And there are so many unique, crazy new technologies that are available that it's helpful to have somebody who is a medical professional help break down the ethical ramifications of those. So I just want to ask you, what is the difference between snowflake adoption or embryo adoption and, say, getting an egg donor or a sperm donor as far as ethical concerns that Christians may have?
Well, I mean, the difference is that the embryo, right, and to the point of your question, people who are struggling, they were having fertility struggles, they'll go over a lot of options, and embryo adoption is going to be different than IVF with an egg donor or a sperm donor. So in embryo adoption, basically the embryo is already created. The egg and the sperm have fused, they've come together, and they're frozen in very early stages. So life has begun. Now, that's different. Sometimes people call embryos eggs, and that's confusing. Two different things. An egg is an egg before it's been fertilized. So a lot of people, one option with IVF is to use an egg donor or a sperm donor if that particular half of the couple is the factor in why you're having fertility challenges. So let's say, there's the husband in the equation is the one with the fertility struggle. Well, then a lot of fertility centers may present the option of you using a sperm donor with the wife's egg. So in other words, it's the wife's genetic material combined with someone else's who she doesn't know, someone else's genetic material to create the baby. And of course, you can do the exact same thing on the opposite side. If the fertility issue is with the wife, well, then you can use the husband's sperm, but a stranger's egg. So that's what egg and sperm donation with IVF is. And the reason that appeals to some couples is that you can say that at least part of one half of the couple's genetics are in the child. So if that is important to someone, there's that. I think the moral and emotional difficulties of it are many.
Immense. Yes.
Right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it bothers a lot of couples when that option is presented, because what about the half of the equation whose genetics won't be included?
What are the emotional impact of this? This child isn't genetically mine, but it is yours.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's right. So and I mean, not to say that there aren't people who parent successfully in those situations. There are, but you can see how it would be an emotionally complicating factor in it. And in terms of the morality of using an egg donor, a sperm donor, a surrogate, I mean, these are not issues that the Bible obviously specifically speaks to, but I do think you have to take a step back and think of what is the motivation behind this. Are we again commodifying human life? Are we just getting too utilitarian with a delicate process that God created? If those options are presented to you and you're encountering fertility challenges, I think you got to really pray about it. I think you got to look at it with a skeptical eye. A lot of egg donors, sperm donors, and surrogates make a lot of money doing what they do. So the motivation is not. It doesn't always create the cleanest situation, and that's just one of the complications.
Well, thank you for that distinction. I think that really helps, because some people, when they hear embryo adoption, they need to hear the biological differences of how that is different from a sperm donor. And I think there are, it's a different set of ethical principles. Going back to the Christian Medical and Dental Association, just to kind of sum up their report, it was, is sperm donation or egg donation consistent with a biblical worldview? They say no, but they say that embryo adoption and snowflake adoption is A-OK and God-honoring. So just throwing that out there. Well, one more question for you. Tell us about what kind of couples are able to adopt through embryo adoption. What kind of candidates fit both the medical and other requirements that you have?
Yeah, at the NEDC, it needs to be genetic male and genetic female. We live in a day and age where you have to say that. You can't just
Ooh, you're going to make some people
mad
with that requirement. Ooh, I can hear them now.
Yeah, yeah, it's happened before. I'll just say that we've gotten some feedback. We don't want to. Yeah, we try to be gracious. We're not against anybody, but we're just like you guys believe at Anna's Heart and AFR. We just believe that there are certain lines God has said you don't cross, and this is this is one of them. In terms of marriage, we believe it's between a man and a woman. So at the NADC, in order to adopt embryos, you do have to be a man and a woman, chromosomally, who have been married for at least 3 years at the time of your frozen embryo transfer. The wife.
So you're looking for strong marriages that are willing to stick together, huh?
Well, that's right. That's why our board came up with that requirement. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, that's for sure. But at least if the couple has been married for 3 years, there's some evidence of stability. It's not just the first year or two. And I'm sure you well know that divorce statistics bear out that a lot of marriages that flame out happen in the first couple of years. So, yeah, our board feels like that's probably a good standard to keep holding. The wife needs to be younger than 46 at the time of the frozen embryo transfer, and that's because we've had medical specialists come up with these rules, and they just feel like it's in the best interest of the child and the woman to not try to have a baby at beyond what's really naturally childbearing age in most cases. So that's where the line is on that. The combined age of the couple cannot be over 100. It can be 100, but it cannot be 101. And that is, again, this is in the child's interest. We want to do all we reasonably can to ensure that somebody will be there, through the child's hopefully 18th birthday, hopefully longer than that, to parent the child. There are other requirements as well. The body mass index must be below 40 of the woman who is having the baby. You're not allowed to be, obviously, you have to be clear of substance abuse of any kind for several years. That must check out. You can't smoke. So those are the main requirements.
With every regulation that you mention, I just hear integrity, and that your integrity is because you care about life and the life of the child and the mother. With every regulation that you have, you want to give these children the best possible opportunity, and that is very clearly seen. Now, I think also may be helpful for some families that are listening to this that are considering embryo adoption, if there are some medical complications on the woman's side that might prevent the pregnancy from being successful, you do also take that into consideration as well. Am I correct?
You're right. And that gets to a couple of other things that I didn't mention that are requirements. One is that you need to be able to pass a home study, done by an approved adoption agency. And again, that's in the child's best interest. Our donors want that. They want to know that the embryos who will become children, we hope, are going to reasonably stable homes. And then, Kendra, to get to what you were talking about, you need to receive medical clearance. So our physicians here will evaluate your history. They will perform a saline-infused sonogram and a trial embryo transfer just to evaluate the condition of the womb and spot, first of all, any potential anatomical challenges that could complicate an embryo transfer. If there are fibroids or polyps that may need to be removed before an embryo transfer can take place, they can find those. And they can find those very unusual cases. And sometimes it's just reality that a woman may have such extreme endometriosis that she's just not a good candidate for embryo adoption. Now, that's very, very rare, but if that's the case, you want to find out. So, you do need to be able to pass a home study and receive that medical clearance as well in order to adopt embryos through the NADC.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. We are almost out of time, but I want to take a moment for you to let any of our listeners know how they could get in touch with NEDC if they're interested in embryo adoption, or maybe they're interested in donating so that other couples and your work can continue.
Yes, and you can do either side of the equation by visiting us at embryodonation.org. Again, that's embryodonation.org. If you're interested in adoption, you would want to check out the adoption FAQs page. If you're interested in donation, you would want to check out the donation FAQs page.
That's awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much. It's so clear to see that you are passionate about this work, that you care about lives. And I know we didn't even get into your personal story, but you and your wife have dedicated your life to be doing this. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the program today. And a special thanks to our listeners as well for listening to Hannah's Heart on American Family Radio. You can connect with us on our podcast page on afr.net.